saw a familiar face walking on the avenue. Both surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too.
Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Gung Ho. It's March 6, 2025. The name of this episode is Trump a Russian Mole? The last show I did was on January 27th by myself and has been, a tsunami of change. You know who I am? I'm Joseph Janini. I'm a retired criminal defense attorney. I was a Marine, or still a Marine. And here's my friend Jim.
Jim Henry, I'm an attorney, economist, I teach at Yale, and I'm an investigative journalist who's done a lot of work on the origins of Donald Trump, including his financial history. And we're going to talk a lot about that today.
Jim is famous for writing an article back in 2016 about a particular FBI Russian informer by the name of Felix Sater. Really incredible article. Then you went on to write No Ray, W-R-A-Y, and you showed how it is so duplicitous and it's so crazy what's going on. All right, let's start with, why do we think he's a mole?
Well, first of all, it's the easiest way to explain his latest behavior. Just this morning, he decided to expel all 240,000 Ukrainians who've taken refuge in the United States, sending them back to the Ukraine where, they're going to be exposed to the Russian invasion. He's taken sides in that war, a war that was launched in 2022 out of the blue by Vladimir Putin. It's cost thousands of civilian lives, hundreds of thousands of military lives. And Trump has taken the position that, we should be backing Putin on this effort. It's inexplicable to our NATO allies. It's poisoned our relationships with NATO. Just this week, J.D. Vance, our Yale-educated vice president, was on the air saying he couldn't recall that the UK had ever helped us in a war, recently, and that they were just, they were beginning to take sides with the enemy. It's just outrageous. This is the exact same rhetoric that Trump's father was engaged in the late 30s when he opposed the U.S. Being involved in World War II. And if there had been MAGA back then, Lindbergh, we would have stayed out of World War II.
We've
all
been
the
saying for
consequences that would
years that, that Trump was the Russian candidate. He's compromised in so many ways, but people now are coming forward with information that's been out there for a long time that indicates that Trump was probably flipped back in 1987. Tell us about that.
Well, there's a number of journalists who've been following this story for a long time. Craig Unger has written a couple books about compromat and Trump's long history of going to Russia and acting as a KGB recruit from at least 1987 on, probably 1980 on, when he was building a hotel in New York and he wanted to have Russian television sets because they were cheap. But the most important thing about that relationship was that after the 1990s, when Trump was a financial wreck, he'd had 6 bankruptcies, and no U.S. bank would lend to him. The only way he's able to revive his portfolio and his business activities was with money from Russian oligarchs and from Deutsche Bank, which was very close to Moscow and was later indicted for money laundering for Russian oligarchs. So we can document the role of this particular individual, Felix Sater, who joins the organization called Bayrock around 2002, and they helped to finance the Trump Soho A lot of the money that went into the $400 million Trump Soho was recruited by Felix Sater from foreign sources.
Felix Sater, all the while, was an FBI informer. He had been caught, he had laundered, him and his criminal co-conspirators had stole $44 million. They got him and they flipped him. And this is Mueller and Andrew Weissman did this. And they put him in Trump Tower at Bayrock. And he just continued to launder Russian money.
Well, we have a solid evidence. I presented this to the FBI and also to the Netherlands authorities that in 2013, 2014, Trump and, Felix Sater and Rudy Giuliani had set up companies in the Netherlands to launder money from a kleptocrat who had fled Kazakhstan with $400 million. Launder Krapanov's money into the Trump Soho. Krapanov was introduced to Donald Trump, and he knew all about this scheme.
By Felix Sater.
So the issue that you're raising is why didn't the FBI and the Justice Department, having an agent within the Trump organization since 1998, when Loretta Lynch and Andrew Weissman recruited him to be a confidential informant, why didn't they prosecute Donald Trump for money laundering? Mueller investigated Trump in the more recently from 2017, 2018. He investigated the election in 2016, but he never looked at financial crimes. Question is, why didn't he? Well, we think it's because Sater. The simple response is they were embarrassed. They would have had to admit that they had a financial Whitey Bulger.
I was there when Mueller was questioned by Congress, and some of the questions were, did you investigate Trump's financials? No. Did you investigate anything about money laundering? No. Did you investigate anything about Russian oligarchs? All in relation to Trump? No.
Yeah. Well, now this has come back to haunt us because, if they had taken this seriously, if the Dutch had prosecuted Giuliani and Sater in 2017, if the FBI had ever taken an interest in this, we wouldn't be dealing with the problems we have today. Trump has just suspended all cybersecurity with respect to Russia. He has called off all provision of satellite information to the Ukraine just the last 2 weeks. He's cut off all military aid to the Ukraine. So he's handed Putin this godsend on a silver platter. Just because of this policy, it's almost inexplicable that Trump would be taking on Canada, Mexico, Panama, threatening to invade Greenland. Greenland is owned by Denmark, one of our oldest allies. So my thesis is that, yes, we have a lot of evidence that Trump was a Russian mole, but the proof of the pudding is, does this predict his behavior? And I think it does. It's the only way to account for his behavior since he's taken office. Meanwhile, we see the U.S. economy far from exploding in growth and lower inflation and having all the promises that he made to his constituents and MAGA supporters come true. The stock market today is crashing again. We've had inflation going much higher than was expected. Job growth has plummeted. This week's job growth figures are, a half of what economists were hoping for. We're going to have a very rocky economy here with higher unemployment, higher inflation, and much more inequality than we ever hoped for before. And we're about to have a budget crisis in Washington. I suspect that we'll have a government shutdown in the next 2 weeks because of the Republican insistence on trying to cut Medicare and Medicaid.
One of your main points.
Here's a diagram today in the Times, about 72 million Americans all across the country who receive Medicaid, and they're dependent on it. Trump wants to kill Medicaid, which is $880 billion a year of valuable medical insurance. Why is he doing that? Because he wants to extend the tax breaks for wealthy Americans. that he passed in 2017. That's $4.6 trillion hole in the deficit. He can't do it this time by borrowing. The only way he can do it is by hurting ordinary Americans, the same people who voted for him.
It's a major heist. That's what it is.
It's an
a major
amazing heist.
And he threatened the Democrats. He told them during his speech that you're going to do this. You're going to pass these tax cuts, or you're not going to be reelected. I mean,
He's going to be surprised. I think ordinary Americans are waking up, finally. They're seeing the bill for his policy coming due already. It's only been a month. The chaos he's introducing. Millions of civil servants. The VA has just been decimated. They laid off 9,000 workers at the IRS. They're chopping.
VA. I know a lot about the VA.
Right. Let's talk about the VA impact.
The VA. It's completely run by the government. It's called socialism. You don't hear vets complaining about their care. Never. We love going to the clinic. We love going to the hospitals. They take good care. Our problem on occasion is getting benefits. Right? There's care and there's benefits. On occasion, they've given us a really rough time. Right now, we love our VA, and doing this to us is like the worst thing you could do. To get us angry, to get us vets angry with Trump and his government, really bad.
I think that this is the turn, because once you take on veterans who have fought and bled for their country. I know my father was in World War II. He served for 3 years. My uncle Frank was in the tank corps that liberated Germany. I was always proud of the service they rendered. I've had members of my family have been on the right side of every major war since the War of 1812, Civil War. We can't imagine a more unpatriotic thing to do to veterans than to take away their medical benefits and their care that they have fought for. And I think a lot of veterans are waking up to the fact that this guy is a traitor in the worst sense of the world to everything that we stand for as Americans. No other sentence could.
He's trying and he's accomplishing it. He's destroying the FBI. He's destroying the Department of Justice. And he has fucked up our court system so bad. I mean, he's taken everything down. It all comes from our Constitution, which is democracy. So he's taken down our democracy.
National parks. He's closed all the national parks. He wants to put them up for sale, privatize them. I was with a fellow who's working at the Santee, South Carolina Fish and Wildlife Reserve. It's a beautiful place. He said all of our people have been laid off. No one can come here anymore. We have, the case of the Justice Department, I know very well. Trump has suspended the enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, one of the best pieces of legislation the United States ever had. It helps us go after crooks all over the planet and kleptocrats like Putin. He's opened the door to cryptocurrency, which is a great way to launder money and to do all these insider deals that are enriching his friends. He has basically deregulated financial crimes for the banks. He's suspended enforcement of the cases against the crypto money launderers. Those cases are gone. So in addition to all the work he's doing with Putin, in addition to slashing benefits for ordinary Americans, he's also opening the door to organized crime, which is very consistent with his whole history of behavior in New York and elsewhere, with people like Felix Sater as partners. So, this is a war on American values that's been declared by an internal enemy. I can't think of any, maybe the closest analogy was the Civil War, when we had folks who really wanted to defend slavery. But this is really unprecedented, I think, the power that is concentrated in his hands. He says that he has a mandate for this. That's what he was saying in his speech to Congress the other night. You look at the election, he got 49.7% of voters who voted. That was about 25% of eligible voters, because a lot of Americans stayed away this time. And also the voter registration polls, voter registration was hacked, I believe. Greg Palast has a great article about this. You can look it up. 3.5 million fewer registered voters in the 2024 election than
Not
the
to
last
mention
time.
mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration, a lot of reasons why there was really poor turnout in this election. We see the example of South Korea, where a president tries to usurp power, and the people are in the streets, and they're turning him out and preventing it. I'm just waiting for that to happen in the United States. Why isn't it happening here, Joe?
It might happen. I'm at the point where we're in a crisis. A coup has been executed against us. We're going down, and the only way we could fight back is to fight back another coup. In our Declaration of Independence, they talk about taking down a tyrant, King George III. But then later on, you read, and it says, if it happens again, another tyrant, we have the right, we have the duty to throw off that government. We're there. We're there.
Well, I've been disappointed in the response of Democrats to this.
They
They're
haven't.
supposed to be opposition. There isn't a very organized opposition to this. Nobody's saying, show up on these dates and
No,
we'll
nobody's
mass
saying how
protest.
serious this is.
What was great was the mayor of Boston went to Congress yesterday, and she was interrogated for having a sanctuary city for immigrants. And she was just very articulate. Everybody should look up Mayor Wu's speech before Congress. What she said was, we have the lowest crime rate of any major city in the country. We have welcomed immigrants. We have all of our Nobel Prize winners are immigrants. We adore the immigrants who are living in our community. And our police and our public officials will not cooperate with ICE when they come here. We'll have an ICE tea party. That's what she said. So what I think the challenge is now especially in blue states, we provide most of the tax revenues to the federal government. California, New York, the high income states are paying far more into the federal government than the southern states like Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas that routinely vote for Trump. We have a lot of power of the purse. We stop paying those income taxes into the federal treasury, they're going to feel it. But the blue states also have friendly relations with Canada. We're all in the north. We should be buying Canadian products, encouraging Canadian relationships, being a friend to Canada.
Well, we know Trump is absolutely ignoring, a separation of powers. He wants to do everything. He does not care about the rule of law. He doesn't care about us. He thinks that he's the law. I mean, he said in jest, maybe, long live the king.
Yeah.
You think that was jest?
No, there's an article today in the Washington Post about the monarch faction in the White House that wanted to declare that he's the king.
I'm going to
with
say this.
absolute authority.
I'm going to say this in jest. Kill the king.
No, I think we have to. My instinct is that we don't need to do any violence here. We need mass protest. And that's always worked in the past in this country a substantial number of times. I don't want us to see this descend into violence. I'm sure that the right is champing at the bit. They have all the guns. So they'd love nothing more than an opportunity to start shooting people. But
he can pardon them all after they.
Absolutely, the Supreme Court has said that he's immune for his official acts. Well, he would call it an official act. No, I think we have to be very careful about how we respond, but we can't just be quiet. And the worst thing that I'm seeing a lot of Americans who are basically just tuning out.
Well,
And
at
they're
least
not paying attention.
say where we are. We're in a crisis.
That's right.
Our democracy is over. We've got a dictator. You know, this is what we have, and a lot of us are responsible for that. And the problem is some people in the government are, you know, have a lot of blame, a lot of guilt.
Well, you see, I think people deserve the government they endure. And
I don't deserve it, you don't deserve it.
no, but I mean, we have an obligation really to get involved in dealing with this situation. And it doesn't have to be a violent response, but it has to be a response that's strong and articulated and organized. And right now, I think all across the country, there's lots of people protesting. Nebraska has waked up. Republican Nebraska, 59% of Nebraskans voted for Trump, right? What they discovered was, oh, gee, 70% of our farm workers were undocumented. So the economy of Nebraska is going bankrupt. You know, they say, wait a minute, we didn't really think this through. You know, all of these economic impacts right now are going to hurt millions of people. I think when we get out of this next month or so, we'll see a mass mobilization like you've never seen before. That's going to be throwing this bastard out.
There was a time during the Vietnam War, the protests got so big that Nixon and his cronies actually were fearful that they would come after them. It didn't work, but that's how big the protests were.
And this is a universal protest. I mean, I'm on the phone with folks in Germany and South Africa and the UK, Australia. They're appalled at what's happening in the United States. They always admired many things about our country, and they're just very concerned about where we're headed. So I suspect we'll have the same kind of, globally, we'll have the same kind of anti-fascist mobilization that we had against South Africa back in the 1970s and 80s. There was a boycott of South Africa that was joined in by most Western countries. And now we're going to see Canada, Australia, you know, the NATO countries that have been abandoned by the United States, binding together and putting pressure on us from abroad. So it isn't just within the United States. We're going to see a global movement to kind of get our house in order, because this is an autocracy. It has become an autocracy, and if we don't get a hold of it, it's going to be an axis of evil like we haven't seen before, with Putin and North Korea, and Belarus and Russia as our allies.
And Trump didn't mention this, but he paused all military aid. You said that before, to the Ukraine. And intelligence, that's going to cause a lot of lives.
Well, the problem is the Europeans allowed themselves to believe that they could depend on the United States for economic as well and military assistance. And very, very integrated. The so-called Five I countries: Australia, Canada, the UK, and the United States and Britain. I mean, it's basically you know, those countries are now re-examining their relationship to the United States. New Zealand, the other member. So, you know, there's a lot of things happening at once here. I think that was Trump's strategy. It was the blitzkrieg strategy. We know from people who knew him back in the 80s that he kept a copy of Mein Kampf next to his bedstead and would read it regularly. You know, so he's not an innocent victim of all this stuff. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's doing, if you follow the events or you study the events in Germany in March 1933, this is very much the creation of a crisis like Hitler was trying to create, where it would allow him to seize power. And he knew that his economic platform didn't make any sense. And the only way to get beyond it was to start acting aggressively against other countries. So that's kind of what Trump is up to now.
All right. We're in a crisis. There's been a coup. We have to fight back as hard as we can It might mean another coup. It might mean veterans. It might mean active duty people. It might mean retired veterans. I don't know what it's going to mean, but we're there. We're there. We're there. And I'm ready. I mean, I'll do whatever I have to do.
Well, I'm looking to young people to actually get involved. They were quite active last year about Gaza, and justifiably so, but I think we need to find, it's hard to sustain this energy of protest. And
Well,
there
we
was a
have
lot
to-
of crackdowns on the students who were turning out, but we're not going to need another wave of mass protests here.
I want to leave with this thought. There are millions and millions of vets out there. When I stood up to join the Marine Corps, the first sentence was, I, Joseph Janini, will defend, will swear to defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's the first thing that goes through our head. And there's millions of us out there that took that seriously. He's done that a couple of times. It's a farce that he did me. That's the first sentence he said when he gets sworn in, Trump. He doesn't give a damn about that.
Well, it's up to us to hold him to that oath. So,
Yeah, and he is, as far as I'm concerned, and other people, other vets, he's the worst domestic enemy we have ever encountered. He's the worst ever. A national, I mean, what do you want to call it? Domestic and national. He's an enemy, a traitor. All right, we only got a few seconds to go, but, well, boy. And remember one more thing. I don't know how the military could look up to him, anybody. Marines call him President Bone Spurs.
right.
So, all right, we got just a few seconds to go. I want to stay around and do another show. You want to do it?
Yeah, I think I've said all I had to say today. I've kind of played out.
Okay, now,
Yeah. I mean, we should do another one next week, or
I don't know.
let's have a series of these, because it's going to be a continuing story. It's like-
But this is going to go on YouTube right away.
Well, I agree with that, but I mean, that's terrific. But I think what we owe it to our viewers here to have a report from the front lines, because this really is a frontline story, and it's going to be around a while before it settles down, I can tell you. And I'm worried about it, the impact it's going to have on regular people, people who are losing their jobs in the civil service, people who are losing their benefits for no reason at all. This Musk entitlement, the fact that they empowered this unelected billionaire.
We haven't even
To
touched,
be,
we didn't even talk about
That's
that.
another whole aspect of this. This is, Hitler was what he was, but he was not a billionaire. He didn't have billionaires who were aiding his efforts. He didn't have all these criminal designs on making.
But he had a lot of,
crypto.
he had wealthy people. that
He had
were
wealthy
backing.
people supporting him, but there's a sense in which this is potentially far worse in terms of a global takeover by the fascists.
All right, let's go out and make a date for another show then.
Okay.
I want to do the Middle East, that.
I saw a familiar face walking on the avenue, both surprised by the